Much to my surprise, doing an oil change on this relatively recent BMW isn't impossibly difficult. In fact, you don't even need any special tools. I know, it's insane. In fact, all you need is a 17mm socket for the drain plug, a 36mm socket for the oil filter housing, and a relatively large drain pan, because this thing holds like 6.5 litres of oil, and yeah, trust me, you need a big one. Other than that, and a jack to jack up the car, that's kind of it, really. I mean, if you've got some ramps instead, that makes it even easier. And in terms of parts, all you need is a new filter, a new sort of lot of oil, and a new copper crush washer for the sump plug. And in fact, if you buy the Bosch filter that we had, it actually comes with not only the new O-ring seals for the oil filter housing, and of course the filter itself, but it even comes with a new copper crush washer, which is fantastic. So what's the process? Well, first pop the bonnet, which is done with the handle in the driver's side footwell and the latch in the center of the bonnet. Lift it up and open your oil fill cap so that as we drain the oil out, there's not going to be a vacuum caused by all of the oil exiting, but no air being able to get in. It's also a good idea to use that 36mm socket to loosen the oil filter cap and housing so that again, air can be drawn in to that filter housing so that any oil that's in there can be drained out relatively easily as well. Then you can either move the car up with some ramps if you've got them. Of course, if you're planning on using the engine to drive the car up onto those ramps, do make sure that you don't do any of the steps that I've just outlined before you do that. Do them after. But if you're using a jack like we are, then you can do all of those steps and then jack the car up. You actually don't need to take off any of the under trays for this either, as there's a small hatch just below the sort of rear line between the two wheels in the center of the vehicle, where you can slide under, put your big drain pan under there, and use your 17mm socket to crack that drain plug loose. Top tip here, for these sorts of drain plugs, keeping pressure on them as you unscrew them, ideally by hand, means that the oil can't escape out until you are fully unscrewed, and when you remove it, it's best to remove it as fast as you can, straight horizontally rather than sort of down and out if possible, to again sort of eliminate as much of the oil dripping onto you as is still inevitable, but minimize that as much as you can. Now, remember that I said you need a big drain pan? Yeah, this is why. We had about 6.5 litres of oil come out, and it turns out that my drain pan is rated for exactly 6 litres. Apparently it can handle another 500 mils if you go right up to the seam, but yeah, get a bigger one, ideally one with a better funnel as well, as that Silverline one that I have just doesn't pour oil out very well. There's sort of too much surface tension in the oil for it to only go out through the funnel. It always spills over the sides. It's not the best, so get a good one if you can. Anyway, once it's done dripping out, you can then install the sump plug, ideally a new one, and definitely a new copper crush washer. BMWs already leak far too often for you to be going and adding more reasons for it to leak, so it's a good idea to at least replace the crush washer, if not both that and the sump plug. And another good idea is to torque it to spec, which is 25 Newton meters. Again, you just need to do everything you can to make them not leak, so this is a good step. Once you have the sump plug in and tightened, you can then go back up to the top and remove the oil filter cap fully. You will want to use some paper towels under it, as there will inevitably still be at least some amount of oil dripping off of it, and then you can remove the old filter from the rather long and actually quite spirally shaft It's an interesting design for sure. And then once you're clean of the shaft, you can then use a pick to get the O-ring that is in the cap. It's sort of tucked and buried away. It can be a bit of a pain to do. Do make sure that if you are using a pick to do that, you don't scratch up the housing and make any places for oil to be seeping out. So again, be careful, pull the old one out, and then use the new one included with the filter, ideally with a thin film of oil coated on it already, and it just drops into place. Of course, make sure that it's seated all the way down into that groove. And then you can take your new filter in the same orientation that the old one came off and slide it down onto the shaft till it bottoms out and clicks into place. Oh dear, we're all children, aren't we? Anyway, it's worth checking your old filter as well for any contaminants or debris that may be stuck in there. These sorts of engines do have a number of sort of common issues, and so if you do find anything like metal shavings, for example, you're generally going to be finding those before it's a symptomatic problem, and so if you're catching it early, you can then have the issue rectified before it becomes a more catastrophic issue. So again, it's worth checking. Then before you put your new filter and filter housing or cap back on, you will need to use your pick again to remove the O-ring that's on the lower half or the oil filter sort of housing itself. That's just a standard O-ring, and again, be careful not to scratch up the surface. And once that's off, you can then install the new one, again with a thin film of oil coating on it, and gently work it down into the same groove you just took the old one out from. Then you can fit your new filter and the shaft down and in, and ideally hand tighten it, make sure that it's threaded on properly before then using your 36mm socket to tighten it down fully, and then use a torque wrench to tighten it to 25 Newton meters, and then another 5 Newton meters. In theory, you can just go straight to 30, but the cap literally says 25 plus 5 on it, which I assume is some sort of process for letting the O-rings sort of seat themselves or not tear as you tighten it. So it's best to just follow the recommendations that are literally on the cap. Once that's torqued down, you can then fill the engine with your new oil. You want to fill about 6.5 litres, and then you want to put the cap back on and check the level. Make sure that especially if you're on level ground, make sure that it is at least between the minimum and maximum lines, ideally closer to the maximum line, as the oil filter is currently fully empty and fully dry, and so some of that oil will be retained in the filter, or is currently missing from the filter, if you like. So as long as it's between ideally sort of the center and maximum, you can then start the engine for about 30 seconds, letting the oil pressure build up, the filter get full. Then switch the engine back off, give it a few seconds to settle back down again, then check the level, and if it's between min and max, ideally again around the middle point, you're all set. But if it's on the lower side or even not showing on the dipstick at all, definitely top up some more, check the level again until it's nicely between that min and max line. So yeah, that's the process. Like I said, it is relatively simple. You don't need any special tools, which is great. Everything is relatively accessible. You don't have to take any of the under tray panels off, which is definitely nice. And you will have to take some care in dumping all of that oil. And of course, make sure you take it to your local recycling center rather than, just putting it in the bin or whatever else. Otherwise, that's kind of it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comments down below. If you have any suggestions or things you want to see me cover in the future, feel free to leave those in the comments as well. Of course, you can hit that subscribe button to get notified of these new videos every week, or you can check out more videos on the N cards, including more videos on this 5 series, or plenty of other cars, full car reviews, and a load of other stuff, so do feel free to take a look. I'll also leave a few links in the description, both for things like hoodies or t-shirts like this at the wheel light design, or there's also some affiliate links for places like Amazon down there for some tools and that kind of thing. So yeah, otherwise, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, I'll see you on the next video.